A look at the absolute basics of the game and getting you started in the best possible way. So if you've not played a game of this style before, then this will be really useful. If it's your first go at Gears Tactics and you're kind of getting mashed up a little bit, then these might help you to get into it a little bit quicker. So the absolute basics of the game is you've got to make your way to objectives, whatever they may be, will be at the top left of the screen. It's usually blow something up or defend something, or run away from something. And you will have an area where you can see quite clearly, and then you'll have this outline which is called the fog of war. So you can't see outside of that, and enemies tend to not run in from that area, aggressively attacking you anyway. If you turn on this thing called the TACCOM, it will tell you kind of any buffs or debuffs that are on with each character at any given time.
Hey.
And it helps to remind you of like what's happening in that mission. So some missions have modifiers, and then you have your passive skills for your character. These won't be as big as this list right now because at the start of the game you don't have as many, but start every now and then looking at it before you have a go, get in the habit, because it will give you a massive benefit if you can remember what these ones can do. Your weapons can give you passive skills as well, and that's when we upgrade the weapons, but we'll look at that in a separate video, as well as your armor.
Okay, now.
Okay, so you have action points, and the action points tell you how many things you can actually do in a go, and that's shared between moving, Overwatch, abilities, and shooting. If you want to move, you'll get a little node will appear, and it will tell you when you've got to the next level of like how many points you need to use. So if I wanted to go here, it'd be 1 out of 3 points. If I wanted to go there, it would be 2. So it's not really worth moving to 2. I'd want to stay at 1 for that. If you do go towards an object though, so like you can see here that's where the node finishes. But if I go up to the wall, it will let me slide into place, and that will give me an extra bit of distance. You want to position yourselves behind cover. If a blue shield shows up behind it, a full shield, then that shows you that you're in full cover and you are offered the best protection, so damage reduction and chance to be missed. If it's got half cover, then you're in half cover and it's not as effective. If you've got nothing, then it means you're exposed out in the open. There are circumstances where you want to go and expose yourself out in the open, but it's not common. It's only if you're playing hyper aggressively. So as you move forward, you probably want to move as few squares as possible, unless you're in an attacking phase, because if you move your characters too far away, they use up too many action points and they can't defend themselves or set up an Overwatch after that go, and if enemies occur, then that puts you in a really sticky situation. So we move Sid here, and that now shows us that we've got an enemy that's will attack us, and we can attack. I have 2 action points left, so I can do a range of things here. We're not going to spend too much time right now on these abilities, but each character will have different abilities, and you were the person that gets to choose what the majority of those are, so you will know what those abilities do, and you'll know probably circumstances where you'll find them useful because you would have picked them for that. You don't need to worry about this too much early game, and you'll start to pick it up as you go. But like for example, this character is a scout, so she works at a close range, so she has the ability to go invisible, she has the ability to sprint, which means she can get a lot further on 1 action point, and she can also throw a proximity mine, which we'll look at a little bit later. Now the basics of it though is you want to shoot them or you want to Overwatch them. Sid has a 13% chance of hitting this, so every 10 times he shoots he's going to hit once. So as far as I'm concerned, that's a waste of time. Therefore I'd want to use my Overwatch cone. I'm not going to do that at this point yet though, for 2 reasons. Once that happens, all of my action points are now committed to Overwatch and I can't change that. That means that if Sid clicks this, he will have 2 shots at anyone that walks in this area of attack, this Overwatch zone, and crucially, if someone falls into that zone from a grenade or something during this go, an enemy, he will then use his action points at that point, which might not be what you want them to do. So so Overwatch comes at the end. Overwatch is a cone that you draw out, and you will attack any enemies with your primary or your secondary weapon, depending on which one is currently selected when you use your Overwatch, for however many action points you've got. So if this character here ran into that, he would be shot twice by Sid. The smaller the cone, the smaller the area you'll attack, but the closer it is, the more accurate you'll be. If you see it with these, where it goes completely blank within the cone, that means you won't have a chance of hitting or triggering. If you see it towards the left hand side of the cone that exists now, that kind of half shaded bit shows that it's a less chance of hitting because it's obscured by cover. So if we get off Overwatch for now and we move our characters into some other positions. So let's put Michaela here. We're going to have to use up 2 action points to move her though, because she's a bit further away. And if we have a look, we can see that now the enemies have completely in that area are now completely obvious, and we've got significantly more than we thought we had. Let's use an ability to position this character over here, and then finally we'll move Gabe over here, which requires 2 action points to do it. So we've covered at the moment the movements, we've covered sliding into places, and we've had a quick look at the abilities and action point. Now the decision of when to Overwatch is kind of a tricky one. Once you've positioned all your characters in the place you want, you can have a look and decide whether or not we want to shoot. Now I know that this character will explode, so I've had a 55% chance of shooting, and doing that has actually blown all of them up, so that's really, really effective. She's used all her action points and she's now no longer useful. This go. Sid, however, is. So let's cover the area in case any enemies decide to appear and attack from this area. Gabe's slightly covered by this, so we're going to put 2 overlapping cones. In this darker blue, lighter blue I should say, anyone who's come in there, they'd be shot by both Gabe and Sid. And this character, let's now move her up a little bit because the area is clear. And we see we've got another enemy in the area, so let's not use her shotgun because the range isn't quite as good. Let's switch to the snub and we use Overwatch on this character. If this character moves now, it should be shot at, although he is quite obscured by that square. She's shot with her pistol, not quite killed him, and he's going to return fire and damage my character.
Showtime, people.
And that is the general principle of how we move and how we decide what we do. This character here I can't really run up to finish off because he's got like an area of attack if we do that. But now we can choose how we attack him. We could shoot him, we could move into new position first in order to do that. But for the purposes of this, I want to show you frag grenades next. Frag grenades come in 2 flavours. You can throw them. If a skull and crossbones appears, it means that enemy is killed. You can very carefully move this around, and if there are more than one enemy, you can actually get more than one enemy with it. You can kill more than one enemy, so it's really good against wretches, which are fast moving, kind of like just melee enemies, and they tend to attack in like groups of 4. So a grenade in the middle of them, you can position it around really carefully and see if you can kill all of them with one shot. This is totally overkill to throw a grenade at this guy. It would wipe him out instantly. The other option we've got with grenades is to plant a grenade. Now it takes 1 action point to do it, and then the radius, it says, will then be a proximity mine on the ground. You can also move first before you plant the proximity mine, and then you can move back. But bear in mind it will take at least 1 action point to get there, 1 action point to drop it, and then if you've got enough, those to move back.
Alright.
Some characters, like this one, you can also unlock ability to throw proximity mines. That is exactly the same as planting a grenade on the floor as a mine, except you throw it and you don't have to move. The other thing with these planted grenades is that you can actually have up to 2 of them. When you plant those down, it doesn't use up your grenade that you've thrown. So you actually have 2. Even though it looks like it will do on this screen, it will red out, it actually isn't the case. Okay, so let's get rid of this guy. He drops a cloud of poison around him, so that's the reason why we couldn't close him down when we did that. And let's move this character up a little bit closer. So no enemies at this time yet. That's not a bad spot for a sniper. We'll move Sid up to here now. No point really moving him there because he can move all the way up to his 2nd node of movement, and we've spotted there are 2 enemies. I'm going to choose to move Gabe all the way over here because I can see there are these enemies there and I want to get him into a good position. That has used all of my action points, but sometimes it's worth using all of your action points just to get them into a place where you want, where they're useful. Now they're all in position, I can choose to use my Overwatch, and that is the process of the entire game. You can move, then you choose whether to shoot, fire, or you can fire without moving, and then you decide whether to Overwatch your remaining units, or I could decide whether or not to reload my weapons, or use some of my additional abilities. So let's quickly stick an Overwatch over here. What we don't want to happen is this guy to run behind, so we're going to stick an Overwatch behind just in case. It's probably unlikely. And I think with this character what I'm going to do, because she's quite close range, is I'm just going to take the opportunity to move her a bit closer while she's still relatively safe from attack. All my action points are used and then it's the next go. Okay, so the last stage that we'll look at in the basics part of this video is these red areas is the enemy Overwatch. If you moved into this area, you would trigger the Overwatch and that would do damage to you. If you move behind full cover, it's unlikely that it will do significant damage. It might just trigger the Overwatch. It might trigger the Overwatch off, but it probably won't even hit you. If you go through half cover and you can slide into it sometimes, or just move behind the cover, then that can quite often do very little damage, and it's a good way of getting rid of the Overwatch. The other thing that you can do is to shoot a disabling shot, which interrupts the enemy and will prevent them from using their Overwatch ability, and that one's gone. That's really useful if somebody else is in the Overwatch area. Like for example, if my character was now in that, if she moved, if she shot, if she threw a grenade, or did any of the actions that appear with a little exclamation mark next to them, you get damaged by it. So you have to decide how you use your other teammates to clear that off. In that case, shooting him with a disabling shot would have meant that if there was a character here, they would be able to move safely. Now here we can see an example of the grenades. You can see that both of them are going to get, one's going to get killed and one's going to get reasonably damaged. You can position these as close as you can to get the most damage possible, and we'll have a look at a grenade going off. Now the times that I'd use a grenade is I probably wouldn't necessarily use one there. I'm going to be able to use one because I can kind of wait out the end turn before we go through the door, but that is, you can try and get more enemies with them. I think anything above 2 is a pretty good use of a grenade. You do want to make sure you always have at least one grenade kicking around with you in case an emergence hole opens. They tend to be in specific missions and against bosses and defend missions. They're not actually that common in the game, but to close them you do need a grenade to go in, or you can put down mines, proximity grenades next to them to blow them up, but that's kind of an ineffective technique unless you're already stood next to them, so it's always worth carrying a fresh grenade on there. Also, if you're in a pinch where you definitely need to kill an enemy and you've got, let's say, a 50-50 chance of shooting them, but if you don't, your team will get battered, well then it's definitely worth throwing one. And you can see here that even though your grenade looks like it's been readied out and it's got to wait a few turns, it doesn't factor in the fact that you can still plant one in one go. Okay, so at this point we can now continue to play the game. I could overwatch this area, I could move, I could shoot at these enemies, we could look through our characters to see which one's the most effective. And that's what's important to do before you jump into any Overwatch shots or anything like that, is to just make sure that you've looked through every character, you've had a look at their movement, their positions, where do you think the enemy's likely to go, and you've weighed up your percentage chance for the shots. So none of these are wildly useful. Made sure your positions are nice and secure, and then you can also check your abilities to see what might be more effective. If you're in a position like this, I think personally for me, one of the best things that we could do here is get some nice Overwatch sectors set up, move some characters into position, it always seems to be Gabe, into some nice flanking positions to force them to move, force them to respond. If you do what I'm doing now, which is to put him into an Overwatch position, sorry, to put him under Overwatch already when he's out of cover, that means that he will be in a situation where anything he does, he'll get hit. So it kind of limits the movement for that character. And we got this one remaining character here. We'll use our last overshot, deliberately not using many abilities here, and we can cover it with this guy. So that's the final one that I'll show you. We've got our enemies now interrupted, so he's not going to get another go. Gabe's Overwatch has been used. That character's moved back. Oh, this guy's decided to swap position, so he fancies a go. Still can't get past that Overwatch there. Oof. Wonder why that triggered. Didn't seem like it was on the edge to me, but it must have been just on the edge of the Overwatch. And then we've got these enemies down. So the last kind of standard play is this thing called execution. You can get action points through abilities as well. This one here, when he dies, he'll actually blow up into poison gas, which I'm just going to do this just to show you. But when you go and attack these, you will kill them. They will have a timer that runs out, and it will tell you how many goes it takes for them to die. Other enemies can pick them up. They tend not to if you put them in Overwatch, or unless they're in a kind of a dominant situation. But they can pick their enemies back up, and then you have to kill them all over again. Albeit with slightly lower health. But if you go and kill them, what you gain for the rest of your team is the an additional action point, and you can do that for as many enemies are on the map. If they're quite damaged, so if you've got their health down quite a way, use the snub pistol to shoot them, and that should put them in a down state instead of outright killing them. There is a bit of luck involved in it. Just be aware that when you do that, you might sometimes put your character into like a sticky situation, so you might want to move them back. And so on. So that gives us an extra 4 points now, so I could move in and kind of crush them a little bit. But we'll look at some more advanced strategy when we do a more in-depth video. But this hopefully is like a nice sharp basics for how to play the game. It's the same process repeated over and over and over in different situations, and it's why it's such an addictive experience, because you never know how the things that you do are really going to play out. Sometimes they can catch you off guard, but as long as you follow that basic strategy of shoot or move and shoot, or one or the other, and then abilities, and finally Overwatch, you should put yourself in a really good situation to do well in the game.